Okay, it is now 5:32 and we're going to get the meeting started. Thank you, Stephanie.
Commissioner Dillard,
Here.
Commissioner Merritt,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Krause,
Here.
Commissioner Agathawa,
Yes.
and Commissioner Novus.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and, what is on the agenda today? We're going to read the Native American Land Acknowledgement, and it says, "We meet today in the community of Iowa City, which now occupies the homelands of Native American nations to whom we owe our commitment and dedication. The area of Iowa City was within the homelands of the Iowa, Meskwaki, and Sauk, and because history is complex and time goes far back beyond memory, we also acknowledge the ancient connections of many other indigenous peoples here. The history of broken treaties and forest removal that dispossess indigenous peoples of their homelands was and is an act of colonization and genocide that we cannot erase. We implore the Iowa City community to commit to understanding and addressing these injustices as we work toward equity, restoration, and reparations." Okay, so I would like to move to agenda item number 2 and move to public comments for anyone in this room or joining us online. Just a reminder that we are only holding public comment before and after because this is a public training for the commission. So anyone online? Anyone in person that'd like to comment at this time? Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator team for agenda item number 3.
Good evening. I'm very concerned by your response. Good evening.
Good evening.
I was telling someone that my excitement about being here is so great that it's possible you will call the mental health authorities. So please be advised. I want you to, by the way, for those watching, I'm Larry Schooler. I'm with Kearns and West. I'm part of the facilitation team. Please, if you would, raise your hand if there's a speech or a portion of a speech that someone else gave that you've committed to memory. Something that you heard someone say, maybe it was a president or a pastor or a spiritual leader or a tribal leader or a athlete or something, and that's something that you have committed to memory and something that you really are inspired by. Does that apply to anyone? I see one nod of the head. I see another couple of hands.
My memory's not so good anymore.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair, right. So I'm going to share with you a passage that I've committed to memory that I feel really connects with how I feel in this moment and in this place. It's from a speech given by then President John F. Kennedy in the 1960s at Rice University in Houston, where I'm from. My dad was there when he gave the speech. And he said, "But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, decades ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard." That's hard in Boston, if you didn't catch it. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. As I look at the commission assembled, I am confident you will win, and it is the privilege of a lifetime to be in your space.
Thank you.
I want to hold some space before I share some information with you. And the reason I'm holding that space is that I want to give you all a chance to think about why you're here.
Larry,
Yes, sir.
I think we had a healing circle to begin first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Eduardo, I don't know.
Sir, we were going to open up with.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Oh, I think we're on the same page.
No, and I apologize, crew. I've been eating all day, and Christine took me for some Italian ice cream. So when I got over here, I forgot my stuff. So tomorrow when we close down, I have my sage, my feather, then we're off. I'll pass it around, and then I'll explain that tomorrow. But I can just say a brief prayer since I'm standing. Give me a second here. Oh, Constable, Creator God, say thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for my relatives over here. Treat me really well. And Creator God, thank you for everything that we have going on here. The gathering here of all the relatives that come from the four directions to offer their expertise, their compassion, their sensitivity, and love for the people that we serve. And Creator God, our children, our elders, and all in between here, that they embark on this school season here, University of Iowa here, and how they travel near and far, that they have a good year, and Creator God, you can bless them, keep them safe here, and then being here, it was already said, being amongst these good relatives, my new relatives here, the brotherhood and sisters of who we represent, is a real blessing for me, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to come over here and be in the presence of everyone here. And so everyone here, blessings to their homes they represent, their loved ones here, that everything they want, their dreams and desires comes true. Says all these things in your name. I hope. Thank you.
Sure.
It's the OGG, am I right? The OGG.
Great grandpa, that's right.
Thank you so much for that. One of the other reasons that I chose the passage from President Kennedy's speech is he emphasizes that we are doing this not because it is easy, but because it is hard. This is hard. And yet, the 6 of you and then others to come that have been recently appointed have stepped into the fire anyway. So what I want to do is give some space before my presentation to allow you to share, first with a partner, and then if you'd like to with the full group, why it is that you're here. Why have you, after years of waiting, stayed in the fire, persisted in your pursuit of both truth and reconciliation? What does being here and being a commissioner mean to you? So the way we're going to do this may seem a little bit elementary schoolish. My last name is Schooler, so I'm supposed to do things
I'm
schooler.
sorry, before we even get there, I think we have to like at least give context, right? To yes, it is hard work. And I think that that's part of what Dave is trying to make sure it comes into the space, the energy, and the tone setting for today. Yesterday was hard. Was it not? Or are we imagining? You all have been doing this for 2-3 years, right? And after so long, you finally get to a room where you're like, okay. We have like not just boots on the ground, like we are inching forward, and things are happening. They're not happening fast enough because folks' lives are literally on the line. And we got folks that, like, you don't know my story. If I could just be like, yeah, because many of us, we all got titles, we do this work or what have you, but we also come from real lives, real communities, and real experiences. And you know, I'm just a girl from the south side of Chicago, sans everything that, and sometimes you just want to say, you don't know me, and you don't know what I'm dealing with today. Even though I got to show up and do some work that I might have signed up for, but I didn't know it was going to be Like, I didn't know it was going to require this of me when I signed up for it. So part of that is we acknowledge that. We feel that. We honor what you have committed yourself to do. But even in that commitment, there's still things that are left unsaid and pages unturned or what have you. And as a collective, because we committed to being accomplices with you, and we are using this language intentionally because we know allies can back out, but accomplices are going to the fire, like, you know? And so we committed to doing this labor with you because it's not just, as my sister said, it's everywhere in the globe. There are no borders. Like, we suffering around the globe because of white supremacist ideology and practices, institutions, and people. So whether we in Massachusetts, Vermont, Chicago, Iowa City, we all hurting. And even as you show up as a commissioner, because we can't even get to the place of being commissioners without giving you the space to tell your truth, to speak and to honor and to bring in relationship with each other what your truth is. And in the process of doing that, as you model and are the conduits for other people to tell their truth, like you have to feel ways. I don't know how you feel, but you are feeling something. You are thinking something. You are experiencing and embodying some things. So before we even get to creating an environment in which other people are open to sharing in Iowa City what their truth is, we know that we have to give you space to share your truth. And we would hope to start before you even speak it to, because some of you might not even want to like say it yet to another person. So before you even speak it, we just want to like take 5 minutes right now to shift some things. Take 5 minutes right now and ask you to write and reflect for yourself. How did you come to this commission as a person of the global majority? How did you even come, like embodied in your bodies? How did you come to even wanting to do this work, to applying to do this work? And not just like the application process, because you are doing this work whether you're a commissioner or not, right? But how? And to be able to release that for yourself, how you came to do this work. And then to even share it with each other, because y'all can't even get in a group of more than 3 of y'all without like the whole world watching. So at this time, we want to give you time to write for yourself, reflect for yourself. How did I get here to be doing and committing myself to do truth telling and reparations work for my community? So if you could just like take 5 minutes and do that, that would be, that's where we would like to start.
I want to, first of all, acknowledge Oasis Restaurant and the work of V and Lois Grace and others to nourish us. There is nothing like breaking pita bread together. So thank you to the restaurant, to V, to others. I also just wanted to acknowledge that I customarily stand when I'm facilitating, and that may make some folks feel as if I am trying to assert some sort of power, and so I've decided to sit for the time being. So I'm going to do that. I want to ask if anybody would be comfortable, not necessarily, you could share your own reaction to the question that was posed, but I'd also be curious if you wanted to share something that you heard from another commissioner that really is staying with you. So perhaps, Commissioner Brown heard something from Wangui that you'd like to share and so forth. So I'll leave it to your discretion, but if there's anything that came out of your small group share or private work that you'd like to share with the collective,
I'll share mine.
please.
I just think it's important to share my story because it's a unique one. I'm on this commission simply because we need Native voices. Because before I was on here, there were none, and there was no attempt to try to recruit people from the Indigenous community, which is mind-blowing, except everybody wants to do a land acknowledgement, but they're like, where are the, hey, everybody, let's put a land acknowledgement together, but there's no Natives on our, commission, right? So they were already writing an acknowledgement when I got on, which was whatever. Anyways, so MLLE approached me back after everything broke down the first time and said, we need people and you're Native, you should apply. And I said, hell no, that's not something I want to do. I'm too feral for this kind of environment. And, I'll probably say stuff that'll upset people. And she's like, well, that's what we need. And so, I was like, nah, I'm not going to do it. But then Jesse Case approached me and said, all this stuff that was going on, and which was the opposite of the good things I was hearing from other people. So that's actually why I joined, kind of out of spite, actually. And so, and also out of anger that there's not Indigenous representation and no attempt to get Indigenous representation. And so I applied, and I wasn't even chosen. They chose a white guy over me. So Mel and team went to bat, and I don't know what happened, but they must have said something, and all of a sudden I was part of this commission. So, I was so not valued, even though my resume is long. I have so many things on there that tell people I need to be here, because I'm not going to lie, I do a lot of stuff. I'm an executive director of a, social justice and environmental justice organization. So, I have, the requirements to be on this commission. And what blew my mind is that they had decided to pick a white guy over me. And so when they decided to pick me over this white guy, I was even more, incensed, if you will, to be on this commission. So I'm really on this commission out of anger. And you'll probably see that in my demeanor often. You'll probably see me just just be that way. And because I don't really want to be here half the time, right? I don't, and I'm also angry because we're not getting paid to be here. Everybody here's getting paid except for the commissioners, right? So brown and black labor, again, is being used for free, to help white people, and other people, and we're here to help the black and brown community, but in essence, we're working for a city that's largely run by white folks, right? So again, I see this lopsidedness happening. So this is why I'm here, and hopefully I can help make change and, maybe get us some kind of, I don't know, in the future, people paid to do this work.
I just want to honor what you said, and I hear the anger, and I guess I wonder what it means to you to have Indigenous representation now on this commission. What does it represent?
If I wasn't here, T wouldn't be here, or Danielle, or Manape, because of how hard I pushed the team to get proper Indigenous representation to run these circles and to do these healing activities, because they wanted it to be led by non-Indigenous people, which really kind of blew my mind as well. Or Marie, because when there was an opening that came up, I was like, Marie, please apply, please, please, please. And so, now we're getting that representation. So that's what that means to me, is you got to break the gate open, you got to cut, kick that door down in order to let others in.
I'm going to say something that I normally wouldn't say, but I've heard several references to white men. I think to most people I present as a white man. I identify primarily as a Jewish man, to be truthful. But I acknowledge that my presence and being a white man may make you all feel something. And I can only promise that I will do my level best to serve you as best I can. But I just wanted to share that with the group because I've heard it said a few times and just want to own the privilege that I have here to be here. Others that want to share something from their conversation or their private thinking?
I'm going to volunteer Mary for our triad when you guys stepped out. If Cliff, you're okay with that, because she shared, and if Mary, if you're okay with me volunteering you, because already it was painful. I looked at you. I wanted also, you cry. I always cry. So, and also remind ourselves, and when I say this, Stephanie, I'm not usually putting it on the facilitator. I usually put it on all of us, and even those who are online and hearing us. Let us remember, as we do this work, to always have Kleenex with us. Please. Yeah, Mary, if you're okay with us volunteering you.
I can use this one, I think. So I just shared kind of my journey of what got me here. So one thing about me, I like to say one thing about me is I'm probably going to cry. So it's already happened today.
Well, we have anger,
Right?
so sadness would...
It's balance, So I just shared when I was young. So I have a white father. He moved us to Iowa. We lived in this very small rural town, like one of those towns where like 20 towns go to one school because it's like, 100 people in a town. And it was an all-white town, and it was a very racist town. It was very normalized. Racism was just, everyday type things. So I dealt with like physical abuse, and I was the only kid in school who was not white, so I didn't have backup. It was just me against the world, as they say. So I'm young and I don't understand what's going on. I don't know why everyone hates me, and people are yelling, "Go back to where you came from," as me and my mom were walking in the store. And so my fight is literally born in racism. So I got out of that town as soon as I turned 18, as you can imagine. I was getting the hell out of there. I came to Iowa City, and I found myself in the Black community here. So I was in the Black community I still am, So, and when I first came, I thought, these people they're going to get me. They deal with racism, like it's going to be awesome. But what I found was the people that I were interacting with, they didn't experience it the same way that I had. A lot of those folks had grown up around all Black folks, so they weren't getting beat on and told to go back to where they came from and all that stuff. They were dealing with racism in a more systemic way. So now my eyes are being opened to a whole nother world. So now I'm seeing, this happening. On top of that, I'm an inquisitive person by nature. I always want to know why. Why are they doing this? Why is this happening? Where is this coming from? So I am reading everything I can. So starting at like 12, literally, I'm reading stuff because now I'm starting to get older and understand why is everyone being mean to me? What is this racism thing? Where is this coming from? So I'm just learning as much, and still am. Wow, I'm not a spring chicken. I've been learning for a long time, and there's still so much to learn. That's how big this problem is. And then I've also been super blessed to somehow manage to be around lots of groups of folks. So, I've worked with folks with disabilities. I got to see kind of that world. I've worked with, immigrants and seen that world, heard their stories. So I've just been so blessed to be enriched with lots of different communities and their struggles and their lives. You start to see a common theme and a common fight. And when you're with these people, and you realize we're just, we're people, we're all people. And so the struggles to me, they become mine because I want to fight for everybody, But it gets really heavy. It's so heavy, and then you're seeing it on the news every day, and you see it in real life every day, and it was eating me. It was really eating me up. I had to act. So I was looking for avenues. I had no idea what to do. None of my friends were activists. I'm going to protest by myself for years, literally by myself, holding my little sign or whatever, marching or whatever. And then I ran into Secaucus, who opened lots of doors, and that's a lady to know to get you places. So she opened doors for me and helped me tremendously to be able to work this energy out in a way that hopefully I can help or do something rather than just sit at home making Facebook posts and letting it eat me up. So that's how I ended up here.
There's so much value in the lived experience that you've had as it relates to this work, and I just honor that. And I'm told you didn't cry, which is not. You can cry as much as you want to in this safe space. But anyway, thank you very much, Commissioner, for sharing that. Leaving some space open for others to share.
Hi, this is Commissioner Johnson. Well, one of the reasons why I joined is I believe that we can make the world a better place if we put the hard work and effort into it. I already know that the world is a very cruel and hard place, but it's only that way when we don't unite together to make things work out for all of us. I keep up with the news a lot, and I always have. I got involved in the politics that were around here in Iowa City around when the elections were happening, and I thought it was amazing that I moved to Iowa from Philadelphia, and this place was so big on when the caucuses were going on. It's just a storm. So I figured this is a nice area, a nice place to try to make a change and difference. I was a Marine myself, and as a Marine, we fight. We fight for whatever reason is a good reason, as far as we are guided. And I also am a boxer, so as a boxer, fight, as you just continue to keep hearing. When I hear that, I hear warrior, I hear a person who is willing to push forward through adversity, and I feel like in this situation, I was told about the TRC opening, and when I heard about the TRC opening, that's when I decided this is another way to fight, and it's a more positive way to fight, and it's going to be hard. I know politics are unique, I'll say, but push through and persevere is the name of the game for me. That's all. So I don't, when I saw things falling apart, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to let anybody else quit. And if they, well, I'm not going to force anybody, but what I mean by that, if we can keep moving forward, that's the goal. Petty things, all the things along those lines, I would like to get to the side, because there are people who sacrifice so much for us to even have this opportunity to get here. And I don't feel like that's an opportunity that should be wasted in any way, shape, or form. So I am here to do whatever it takes to make it happen, and fear is not in a game plan. We already know it's a mountain to climb, but others have done it. I am no different. I will do the best I can to the best of my abilities. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
I know how cliched it's become to thank someone who served in the military for their service. I wear a bracelet that I was showing Eduardo that has the name of a good friend who was killed in Iraq in service to our country. And so just know that I see your service, and I appreciate it. And I see all of your service, because this is, as the commissioner pointed out, service. It is volunteer, and it is a form of service. Holding additional space if anyone wants to take it.
So when I was listening, hearing the prompt, how did I come to the TRC? I would say that when I joined, I did not know what a TRC was. I thought I was joining a cool project to give people an opportunity to tell their stories. And I say cool, like not cool, it's racial issues. But I am a person that in a past life I was a journalist, and I believe in the power of storytelling. I did an amazing project in college where I was telling these two ladies where I sat with friends and children of immigrants, and that dynamic of telling what it's like to grow up as a child of an immigrant who doesn't speak English, and how that is different, and just being able to share that story. I also work for a nonprofit where I work I used to work more closely with children in this community who have experienced so much racist acts. And as a person who grew up, born and raised in Iowa, I was appalled because it was not my experience to that extent. So having the opportunity to give people an option to tell their stories, knowing I'm a person that has a little bit more opportunity to share my story, was really what I was looking forward to. But again, when I started this journey, I had no idea what we were getting into. I could not fathom what we are doing now and talking about almost 2.5 years ago.
If I may, because it's been some time for all of you on this journey, not months, years, right? Like, so now thinking about how you got here and what a commissioner, like being in this work, what a commissioner is, what comes up for you, because it's not what to your point, when you started, you had I don't know, maybe people are just, but what does it mean when you say, I am a commissioner?
You want to take me?
Is that open?
And that's open.
Anyone? Okay, I'm just gonna say for myself, I feel like it's been an evolution of emotions. There's been times where I've been ashamed to say I'm a commissioner. There's times where I've been angry and wanted to share the world, like this is what I'm here for. There's been times where I was afraid because I didn't know what it meant. So it's been a roller coaster of emotions. Yeah, I don't know how to further answer that.
I just wanted to mention that, as you said, I thought this was a cool project where people would get to tell their stories.
Let me not say cool.
No,
again,
but what went through my head was, I think it actually is, or it will be, meaning that for me, in my experience of TRC work, it is at its core giving voice to people who felt they had never had a voice before, and giving them a captive audience of you all as stand-ins for the broader community. So just to say that perhaps your perception will meet reality more quickly than you think, or more neatly than you think. Did anybody else want to take the space? Go ahead, Vice Chair.
When you asked about what does it mean to be the commissioner, the name, I don't think about the name. I mean, because I've served as a commissioner for something else with the city of Coralville, so it's like that itself is just a title. But when somebody asks me about, you're with the TRC, what does that mean? Who are you? You know, I love that opportunity to explain. You know, we're going to give people a voice, you know, to explain their trauma or whatever, to talk about their truths, and try to help educate everybody else to have some empathy and change their ways. And the fact of trying to be a part of that, I was telling you, I've been in Iowa since I was 8. Yeah. My dad was a radiologist in New York and had a midlife crisis and decided he wanted to farm and came to Iowa. I've lived in DC, I've lived in Minneapolis, but I keep coming back here, and now I know Iowa City is going to be it for me. And I'm hoping that my experiences that I've had living in rural Iowa, being around Iowans, to help bridge or close that gap, and I want to be a part of that. I'm very passionate about Iowa City, and I don't want to see it turn into some of the ugly places that are around. So grassroots start here, and I see that it could be something major and could be applied elsewhere. And
Thank you for that.
it means.
And
Commissioner Johnson, I think you maybe had.
go ahead.
I just consider, basically, I'm a voice. I'm a voice for those who might not have or feel they have that voice. I am just a vessel. I am here to make sure that if you do need your truth heard, somebody will step up and help you up and make sure that you can get to the podium, and then the next person, and then the next person, and the next person. There's no... I do not see myself as super important when it comes down to it, other than the part where I can help out somebody else. That's it. That my goal is to make sure that we do not let anybody be silenced. That's it. That's the bottom line.
And we asked that question very intentionally. And Eduardo, if you want to share more of what you were saying earlier, because as commissioners who are also community members, there is a duality of being in this work, that you have every right to continue telling your truth. But as you all are speaking and saying, creating and leading the space for others to tell their truth and be the conduits of the listening. Eduardo, did you want to say more?
Very briefly.
Can I go before Eduardo?
Oh, absolutely.
Just next to my fellow commissioners before we
Please.
transition to you. I'll start by piggybacking on what Cliff has just said, making himself a voice, and that's my why. Larry, you started off by saying some of the things you remember. And as you talked, you started with the word why. I remember today, during my day job staff meeting, somebody shared a video of the song Amazing Grace. Sakawi's I'm Not Going All Christian. By Amazing Grace by Michael Smith. He was told to sing, so he sang. Then he was told, okay, now sing it the way you sing it in the hood. And in our meeting, we all got chills when he sang it, when he was told to sing it the way he sings it in the hood, or the way they sing it. And the person who was facilitating, when he was told why is he singing it different ways, he was saying one is the what, and the other one is the why. The first one was the what. So what are you doing? I'm singing Amazing Grace. The second one, when he was told to sing how they sing it or how he sings it in the hood, was the why. And so for this month, we have our meetings monthly, like a lot of organizations I know. The facilitator, the point of doing that and playing that and telling us that is, as we sat through the meeting and we went out, what's your why and what's your what? So it has stayed with me, and this will stay with me for a long time, because when you talked of your why, you're here, and I know when of the facilitators, you and Eduardo and the members of your organizations were some of the people that we interviewed and have been interacting with. That's one of the questions we didn't have to ask you, but you answered that, even you, Eduardo, everyone here, and you repeated that here. So, and for me, for a lot of people who've heard me, I'm saying it again. My what is being on this commission. Why? And I always take my story back to 1847. Of course, I wasn't born. I mean, I don't know whether anybody is alive who was born in 1847. If there was, I would want to be that person. But my why I'm here starts there, and I repeated that yesterday. That's when the first white person landed on the Kenyan coast. I'm from Kenya. I originally come from Kenya, but now I'm an American citizen. So, but just because I wasn't there, my ancestors were there. And African philosophy and a lot of the world, they operate on the Ubuntu philosophy, humanness. So this person came, and my ancestors, they looked at this person. Some of them were, what is this? It isn't an animal because it's walking on two legs. But when we look at it, it's walking on two legs. But the skin color, is it that it doesn't have a skin? But, and whatever interactions were happening, it was the universal human language of individual sign language. Because this person, Vasco da Gama, wasn't speaking Gikuyu or whatever language that was there, or Swahili on the Kenyan, East African, Indian Ocean coast. And he wasn't speaking Swahili either. He was speaking Portuguese. But they were speaking. My people, the African people, and I picked Vasco da Gama because he was the one who landed on my ancestral land. But there were other white people landing everywhere on the globe, and different reactions and interactions. My people, in their Ubuntu or humanist philosophy, they realized this is a human being. They welcomed this human being because it's a human being. We don't have the same skin color, but it's a human being. And the interaction began. Unfortunately, the humanness wasn't returned. And the people who led from that coast coming up were Christians. They carried the Bible. And humanness is welcoming the person. Have a seat, have a drink of water, or whatever meeting. Let's share. Including land to shelter themselves and for the church. And of course, one of the Christian practices, let's bow our heads or close our eyes in prayer. To date, most of Africans are left holding the Bible. The white man had the gun, the land, and is still having that land. fast forward 20 years ago, Wangui comes into Iowa City to pursue education. Because one of the things that my ancestors were told, learn the ways of the white person, learn their language. Once they realized they were robbed, so that you can get yourself off this yoke. I get to Iowa City. Of course, we did throw them out of the continent as late as 1933, end of apartheid. Sakawis, we would be where indigenous peoples are in North America, in America, if that didn't happen, if the oppression, the white colonization, the political wasn't thrown over Africa, but it was thrown. But economically, that's documented, it's still there. Africa is still under that. So back to, fast forward, today, 20 years ago, Wangui lands here with her 3 daughters, with her 2 sons, between 2 and 15, to pursue this white man's education, to continue shaking off this yoke, and my now ex-husband. But as I do that, life happens, because then I realize, okay, now I re-met the other ancestors who ended up here involuntarily. And I get to realize, I had read about it and thought about it, the oppression in the Americas. And now I come and find now I'm in the middle of it. And now the struggle continues. And that's why I begin my story all the way to 1847, and it's happening even now. And I've been living in the city that I never left 20 years ago, and still wanting to make it better, which is why when the opportunity came, I joined, and also knowing that it's still happening and I'm part of it. And the summary of my life in Iowa City with racial discrimination is living in irrelation with whiteness. Yes, geographically we inhabit the same space, my Iowa City, but in irrelation. And as I joined the commission, I dared to dream, because that one day it won't be in irrelation. The pessimist part of me thinks, Wangui, it won't happen during your time, not even during your grandbaby's time. She's 3. But I dare to dream. So I am here, and it's been a good ride since 2021. The good part, working with all of you at whatever time you joined, that has been it's been good. But at the same time, in that good, because there have been successes, even just sitting here, this is huge. Larry, I'll join you when you're going for that session. You talked of a mental health session because of the excitement. Yeah, just going through this and wanting to make my Iowa City better. And I will stop there. That's the short form of my why.
It's beautifully said.
Don't laugh at me, Lauren. You know I can filibuster. I can talk the whole night.
I know you
But I can listen the whole night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that I better speak about this when my turn gets to talk about public hearings, because I was thinking of this when you started talking about music and singing. You know, there are certain songs, you hear them and they change your world. And Amazing Grace is one of those, for sure. So being in the scenario, listening to that song, being anywhere listening to that song has a deep impact on you. Singing that song for others is another role. I fear that kind of role, right? Having that kind of responsibility. But someone is going to sing the song. But there is another role, there is a third role here that is also very necessary. There's someone who needs to create the platform for the singer. And no one sees that person, because the role of that person is not to be seen. It's to facilitate the role, facilitate the singer's space, and to facilitate a space for those in the audience. And the complicated thing about Truth Commissions is that that is a role that is asked from you. You are that third person. You have your own experiences. You could sing perfectly well, but you're facilitating others to come with their voices and to hopefully change the life of the listeners. So that's what we're going to see, and not easy at all. It's a way of being an organizer, for sure. It's a way of being an activist. Only it's a very special way, and I hope I have time later on to show how they have done that in other commissions and the different ways to do that.
I have two process questions. The first is for you, because we're about to pivot, and I wonder if you need a moment, like a 5-minute pause, whether for the restroom, for water, just to breathe. Question one. Question two is to you. I feel that it would make more sense to go directly into hearings rather than fact-finding. And I'm wondering if you'd feel comfortable if we inverted the sequence and had you go.
Yeah, we can move the sequence, and I agree with the idea of stopping a little bit.
Yeah.
After listening to all the stories we probably have.
So would it be all right? I have 6:35. Would it be all right if we came back at quarter till?
Yeah, makes sense.
And then we will pick up with Eduardo's presentation, and I will come in again
Makes sense.
later on. So we'll pause here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's more functional.
Can I invite everyone to their seats?
Look at her face. And for just 2 minutes in the space.
And then I'm just going to pass. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to begin our circle in this section here with an embodied practice as a way to find clarity of consciousness, to rest our minds, to check in with what we may be feeling, and to notice the ways in which our bodies become entangled with history, the history of this nation, and with our society, our community as a whole. So a mindful, embodied practice helps to bring us back into what's happening now, and we can grow our capacity to be present. So I'd like to invite you to gently close your eyes, or if you prefer, to lower your eyes.
This Thursday!
Heavier eyelids, and to keep the gaze soft toward the floor, the table in front of you. And if you can you scooch away from the backs of your chairs and to bring your pelvis, your hips closer to the edge of your chair as a way to untuck your tailbone, the end point of our spine, and allow the legs to uncross and place your feet about 7 inches hip-width distance apart, with your feet pointing straight forward. Maybe you can spread your toes wide in your shoes, in your sandals, and can you notice where your toes, your heels, and the sides of your feet are connecting with the earth below you? Take your arms and place your fingertips on your chair behind you and press your fingertips into the chair and allow that to lift your spine towards the sky, lengthening and taking the crown of the head higher, and then gliding the skull back. We sit on our phones, our computers, with our heads thrust forward. And this is an opportunity to create a direct line from the crown of our heads through the base of our spine and into the earth below us. You could release your hands and just allow the hands to rest gently on your thighs. Press your shoulders down and lengthen the neck as you grow taller. And then turn your attention inward towards your breath. And just become the observer or the seer of your breath. Just notice the pace, the rhythm, the texture of your breath. And notice if the breath is beginning to slow down when we share our truth, when we tell our stories. Our awareness heightens. Our central nervous system might become stimulated. And when we return to the breath, we can bring greater focus, increase the awareness, and calm the mind. And as you sit with your breath for a few more moments, see if here you can increase the length of your inhales, increase the depth of your exhales. And begin to notice the impact that the breath is having on the mind and on the body. Notice where in the body there might be some sensitivity, where there might be some tension. And bring your awareness to those places. And offer some love, offer some caring. Embrace. And then come back to the feet that are connecting with the earth below us. Know that our feet are standing on Turtle Island, Pachamama, Mother Earth, providing support, predictability, grounding. And allow what you can take from the earth below into your heart. And notice now the overall climate of your breath. Observe its texture. And when you're ready and in your own time, you can gently blink the eyes open and bring with you back to our gathering what you may have collected from this moment of quiet.
Thank you, Melinda, so much for helping us with this part. So thank you so much, Melinda, again, for helping us transition into this section of the conversation. What I want to do now is to provide you with a few cases or examples of how truth commissions have typically prepared what they call public hearings, meaning platforms, spaces that are safe, that are respectful, to facilitate survivors an opportunity to share their stories. I have selected 4 cases. One is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. The other one is the TRC of Canada. The third one is the Truth Commission of Greensboro, North Carolina. And the last one is the Truth Commission of my country, Peru, where I worked. In fact, my job was to organize the hearings. So, and I would like to perhaps provide just a couple comments before I show each video, and then allow for the conversation to happen. What are the elements that jump to your attention and that you think are probably the most significant? So, if we could, Stephanie, perhaps we need to take down the lights a bit. All right. Thanks so much, Stephanie. Okay, and the first is, yes, that's the one. We are still a little bit in the
Hy-Vee's daily deals are whole seedless watermelon, just $3.88.
Torture. How many times have you heard stories of South Africans who said they were tortured?
It's 3 minutes.
Did you believe them? Well, this week, the Truth Commissioners and the public had no doubts as they sat in silent anguish listening to testimonies of horror.
Sinqokwana Malgas was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment in the 1960s. After his release, he was detained frequently and tortured on each occasion. His son died in detention after police poured acid over him.
You have told us today that you were tortured many times in many different places. If you are able to, and it's not too painful, could you describe some of that torture? What actually did they do to you?
One is there is what they called the helicopter method of torturing. Torturing of some kind. They suffocated me by pulling a mask over my face. With the helicopter method, they put a stick behind your knees and you were hung upside down. Whilst this was happening, you were suffocated.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. That's all.
Joe Jordan, now a member of the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature.
So, the South African Truth Commission was the first one in organizing public hearings. Before this commission, all truth commissions were basically behind closed doors. And what they did was just fact-finding, getting the information, compiling the information, writing a final report. So they were what we usually know as a blue ribbon committee. A committee of experts that gathers information, writes a report, publishes a report. There were many truth commissions before South Africa, but this is usually seen as the first one, probably because it was the first one in using this kind of instrument. And they only did that because they have very strong alliances with the victims and the survivors organizations. The Truth Commission in South Africa was created because, as part of the political transition in that country, the political leaders of both sides decided that there was going to be a mechanism of amnesty for the people who committed human rights violations. But they agreed also that in order to receive an amnesty, an individual would have to participate in hearings and confess what they had done. And since they also realized that it would be unfair to just give an opportunity to persons accused of human rights violations, they decided to do hearings with victims and survivors. Over time, they received in the Truth Commission around 4,000 people. They organized around 50 different hearings. And the hearings looked like this. So they were public, both in the sense that they were televised nationally, and also that they were conducted in public spaces with persons coming to participate in the audience. I don't know if you may have realized ideas, images that come to your mind, but you can see the commissioners in front of the survivor, in front of the victim. It's a very close setting. It's almost circular, right? And you have some kind of a conversation, right? The vice chair of the commission, who was a pastor, Alex Borain, asking questions to the survivor who comes, right? This is, of course, just a little fragment, a segment of what was really a long testimony. But you can see that it is not just the witness who is feeling the pressure and crying and manifesting all these emotions, but also the commissioners themselves, right? And the way they are doing it is just supporting and accompanying the person who came. So that's one example, and this is how Truth Commission started to use hearings. And that, of course, created enormous reactions in South Africa, because just until that moment, basically people could say they didn't know, could say that everything had been an exaggeration, or that these were stories that were used for political purposes. No longer after this. Which is why the presenter of the TV show, which happened every week, by the way, says, have you ever heard stories about torture? And have you believed those? This is what was shown by the Truth Commission this week. And so this is what the way it starts. Let me show you a second example. And this is Canada.
So long, it takes dozens of people to carry the names of more than 4,000 children who never returned home from residential schools. These are the documented cases. The total number of deaths is believed to be much higher. In their memory, the first Indigenous Governor General placed tiny shoes on stage, followed by the Prime Minister. They watched as survivors told their stories.
I hate your residential school. I hate you. You're a monster. Your throat muscles force me down to your stomach. Your throat muscles squeeze my happiness, squeeze my dreams, squeeze my native voice.
I believe your stories, and I believe in reconciliation as part of the healing journey.
the prejudicial policies that forced more than 150,000 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children into these government-funded institutions called out.
I saw the impact on my community. I felt the void left by the children.
It's taken decades for the country to face the damage done and its enduring impact.
This important work of reconciliation is not a one-day affair. As we say, it will take us several generations. On September 30th, I am simply asking you to extend the same courtesy to survivors that you are used to doing for others.
Residential school intended to assimilate us and destroy our culture. We are still here. We will survive.
Resilience, even as waves of trauma ripple through generations.
I'm an intergenerational residential school survivor. I know what's happening and I can feel the pain of all the other children that have been hurt because of this.
Indigenous youth her age are still being ripped away from their families, more now in foster care than at the height of the residential school era.
All I want everyone to know is just to understand and reflect and just be able to learn from all of the past mistakes, and that we can all take a step forward in reconciliation.
One leading to a future that breaks the cycles of the past. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Most people have no...
So, I remember the first public hearing in the Canadian Commission. They did it, if I'm not wrong, in Winnipeg. And something that I think was very useful on the side of the Commission is that they didn't organize it something that looked or resembled a very formal space. They asked the organizations, the Assembly of First Nations, and a Circle of Survivors to tell them how they wanted to tell their story. And the way that came out of that consultation was to organize circles. So the circles were precisely that, not just figuratively. There were actual circles of people all together coming in a huddle, right, to listen to the stories. And I think that was very, very useful, very, very appropriate, because it reflected the culture. And the big difficulty, I think, was that since there had been impunity for generations, the survivors were old, were elder people, and some of them were unable to come and share their stories. And in some cases, right, the people telling the story were the children of the survivors or the grandchildren of the survivors. So, but there was the intention of the Commission to listen. Even if they were not able to listen to the direct survivor, they would find a solution. They would find a way to channel those ancestral voices. And I think that is what they tried to do. But as you can see, it became also a very open space. Jessica.
Oh, I just wanted to add some important information because it wasn't just elders. The last residential school closed in 1996. So my cousins actually went to the residential school on my reservation. And so there was residential schools opened for people that were my age actually to attend. So just so you know, the atrocities kept going.
No, you're right. And in fact, the mechanism of forcibly assimilating kids, right, is something that it didn't start in Canada, of course. It started with the so-called industrial schools here in the U.S., right?
Yeah, so the industrial school, or these, they're called boarding schools here. So just to clarify, like there's residential schools in Canada, boarding schools here, but it's the same thing. There were actually 3 here in Iowa, and actually one right in Nebraska right now that's being sonared, I believe, or looked into for bodies at the moment. So it's not like this isn't happening like here as well. And then I just wanted to add one last thing, just for facts. and I forgot it, but, so, but yeah, I just wanted you to, just to clarify that.
So that's the Canadian example, and of course here the Boarding School Coalition is trying to create a U.S. Truth Commission on this issue precisely.
Yeah.
Right. In Australia, there is right now a local Truth Commission dealing with this. In New Zealand, there has been an effort to deal with this because this has been a very common practice. And of course, it's incredibly difficult to bring it now to the present. And I think they did a very good job in Canada with this.
That's what I wanted to add, sorry. When you say that it was different, right, like it wasn't like just like a commission was set up where people just talk and testify. Like these, our relatives, like they decided that they wanted it to be culturally appropriate. So that's why you see it carried out the way it was carried out. And I think that's really important to note with our commission, that culture has to be the backbone behind everything that we do, like the culture of like Black and brown folks. So that's why we need food all the time and everything we do. So.
All right. Let me show you the third example that I was thinking would be useful. So this one is the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Just a second, please. And that passes. And just to remember the case, this is a result of an act of extreme violence that happened in 1979. The Klan and neo-Nazis attacked a demonstration by union activists and in a black neighborhood, and they killed 5 people and wounded many others. Now, when that massacre took place, the attackers were tried and they were declared non-guilty, of course by an all-white jury. And the survivors, 20 years later, decided that since they had been cheated of their possibility of obtaining justice through the regular criminal court system, they would create a truth commission to establish the truth about what had happened and to create a social process by which people would learn from it. And what is interesting about the Greensboro Commission, and you will see this, is that they found the survivors who wanted to share their stories. They also found the perpetrators who wanted to tell their stories, some of which were, you are going to see that, again, quite old, and they were not repentant. This was not an easy or satisfying space in which you have a perpetrator apologizing or asking forgiveness for what he did. Actually, they vindicated what they were doing. And that is what was so hard about it. But the commission created that space so that the community would see how divided they were about their memories. And so let me show you just a fragment of one of the hearings of the Greensboro Commission.
We will now bring this hearing to order. We thank everyone here for their willingness and openness to listen to the variety of viewpoints on traumatic events in our history.
Over the course of 3 public hearings held in Greensboro, 54 people spoke to the Commission about the events of November 3rd, their origins, and lasting impact.
The reason I came to Greensboro, they put the poster out, death to the Klan, said we was hiding under rocks, we were scum. I'm not scum, I'm as good as any man walks on this earth.
Gunfire, screams, gunfire, screams. Engines gunning as the shooters fled. An eerie silence. I could smell gunpowder in the air and heard the groaning of people who were dying.
You don't let 2 groups with extreme political views from each other come together without a buffer. And the buffer would have been the police. In my opinion, yes, we should have been there.
Thank you. If we can stop there. Just an interesting detail here. The Greensboro Commission was not an official commission. It was not established by the city of Greensboro. The survivors wanted the city to pass an ordinance, a resolution creating it, but the city refused, which is why it had to be an all-volunteer effort, meaning it was the survivors themselves who organized the commission, who brought together the community to actually run a commission, select commissioners, organize hearings, and so on and so forth. And also because it was not official, it didn't have any power to compel testimony. They were not able to, deliver anything resembling a subpoena, for example. So they had to talk, and they had to persuade each person to come to this kind of discussion, including, as you have seen, retired police officers who had actually facilitated what happened that day, and they had to persuade former Klan members to come and present their perspective. And that allowed them to be able to say, when they finally prepared the report, we have heard all voices, and it was true. They had. And that is what I think makes this particular case very interesting. It's not an official commission. It's perhaps the first local commission in the sense it happens in a city, but it's not official. So this can probably bring here some ideas, right? You are a local commission, only the advantage is that there is actually an empowerment by the city for this particular commission. Larry, you were a journalist at the time of the Greensboro Commission. I don't know if you can add something here.
I was just going to add, Eduardo, that I think one difference between Greensboro and others is that in many cases the people who testified during the hearings were invited. In other words, the commission set up a trio of hearings based on what led to the shooting, what happened at the shooting, the aftermath of the shooting, and then they asked specific people, if I recall, to be at each hearing based on what they could provide as expertise. So it's different. It doesn't mean it's better or worse, but it led to a level of dramatic power that I think is hard to achieve when you don't know who's going to be there. But to hear some of what both the Klan and the organizers of the rally testified to, like the same day, the same hearing, and in the same space was extraordinary. But it was a choice on the part of the commission to not subpoena, of course, but to sort of stage manage that to the extent that they did.
When was that hearing?
2005.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think there are going to be lots of questions, interventions, ideas. Let me show the fourth example, and then we can probably come around. Yes,
Before you move on, I just wanted to share that the Greensboro community, the beloved community, is in the process of establishing a statewide Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So this past fall, they invited activist organizers from all around North Carolina to come together and to organize and to build momentum for a statewide commission.
Yes, great point. The last example concerns my country, Peru. Peru had an internal conflict that lasted from 1980 to 2000, so basically all the time I was growing up there. And it's a conflict that confronted, on the one side, the Peruvian state, and on the other side, subversive organizations, one called the Shining Path that became very, very well known. And we calculated in the commission at the end of our work that about 69,000 people had been killed or disappeared, which is just an indication of how brutal the conflict was. And 3/4 of that people were people from the rural indigenous areas of Peru, speakers of the Quechua language. So the violence was not random, it was directed, it was targeted. And it is the communities that were indigenous communities, both in the highlands and in the Amazon areas, that were particularly targeted by the violence. So I think this is also, this was also very, very challenging to organize. The commission was established by law. The country established the commission. It's an official institution. The members of the commission were selected by the national cabinet, the cabinet of ministers, and we worked for over 2 years, just short of 2 years. And this commission also did not have any kind of subpoena power, and they did not want to invite to the hearings perpetrators, because there was always the option of using criminal justice mechanisms, and if you invited perpetrators to come, probably they would alter the possibilities of criminal justice later on. In Peru, there was not an amnesty. There was not any conditions to obtain an amnesty. People who committed these crimes would be prosecuted, and in fact, many have been prosecuted. So the focus of the hearings was to listening to the victims directly, to the survivors directly.
Había sido tan masiva, la violación de los derechos humanos había sido tan grande y la impunidad era prácticamente total, que una comisión de la verdad en un contexto de transición democrática era indispensable.
The Human Rights Movement insisted that the transitional government establish the Peruvian Truth and Reconciliation Commission, headed by Dr. Solomon Lerner. Carlos Iván de Gregori and Sofia Maher, the human rights leader, and 10 other commissioners were empowered by the new government to uncover the truth about Peru's 20-year war. In an effort to have a broad perspective, Beatriz Alva Hart was invited to join the Truth Commission.
El trabajo de la Comisión de la Verdad es importantísimo para el país. Y de ahí que yo diga, o sea, no es un trabajo, es una misión en la que tenemos los 12 comisionados.
Y vamos a llamar a los siguientes testimoniantes. Al señor Ramiro Niño de Guzmán.
Empezamos a vivir momentos de miedo.
Señora Luzmila Chiricente.
Peruanos, nosotros somos partes, somos dueños del Perú.
Señora Magdalena Montesa Benavides.
Era primera vez que tenía relaciones, pues nunca antes lo tuve relaciones con algún hombre, era virgen.
In the first public hearings ever held by a truth commission in Latin America, Peruvians listened in stunned silence.
Y violación.
Nunca me imaginé la magnitud de la experiencia personal, de la experiencia profesional y de la experiencia emocional que eso iba a significar para mí. Porque estaba dándome cuenta de todo lo que no había visto. Es ahí cuando yo abro los ojos y yo tuve la posibilidad de estar en la primera exhumación. Y lo más duro es cuando lavas tu primer cráneo. Porque más que bien, no sé, una tibia, puede ser el hueso de un animal. Pero cuando lavas un cráneo humano, es una persona. Entonces, qué terrible. Mi dolor no solamente era de solidaridad por esa persona, sino mi dolor era decir, ¿dónde estuve yo? Yo tengo clavada en el alma las miradas de todas esas mujeres, de todos esos niños que vi, que conocí en las alturas. Por todos ellos, yo les pido perdón. Y a todas las mujeres y a todos los niños huérfanos, a todos los hombres que han sufrido, a todos ellos, yo les pido perdón.
So again, this is a completely different case. Perhaps it's more similar to the South African case because it's about an armed conflict, right? There was an armed conflict. There were parties fighting, and the scale of the violations is unbelievable. The 69,000 number just refers to the people killed and disappeared, right? But the hundreds of thousands of people who had to leave their homes, who had to emigrate, go out of the country, that's an enormous number, not to mention torture, assaults, different kinds of violations. So, what I think is important is that the Commission had several activities at its disposal, that it had tools to deal with it. Even thinking of the enormous scale, they had to do something. And what they decided to do was, first of all, they were going to receive testimony. They were going to install offices in all the country, open the doors, invite people to come and talk about what had happened. And the Commission received about 22,000 testimonies, which, in addition to the records that existed of that time, allowed the Commission to reconstruct the history of those years. Second, the Commission was going to organize public hearings. That is, organizing about 40 events around the country in which it invited people from the different cities, the different locations, the different regions to come and talk about what happened too. And those were hearings with people who were invited. It was not an open door, first come, first serve basis. It was invited because the testimonies were selected on the basis of their capacity to teach something to the nation. The third one was the exhumations. So since you are talking about thousands of people missing or disappeared, this missing or disappeared persons means basically that one of the parties of conflict, typically the army, would execute people, would commit a massacre, and then try to disappear the bodies, putting them in some unmarked grave. And so one of the things that the Commission did was to identify bodies. So you have seen, for example, images of the moment of the devolution of bodies to a community that are completely identified now with names so that the community can give them proper burial. Right? That's another activity that the Commission did, and of course the Commission worked only 2 years. It was unable to do that for all the cases of missing and disappeared persons, but it opened the possibility of doing that, and there are exhumations happening even now, 20 years after the Commission, and 40 years after the war. And the other thing, of course, was that the Commission wrote a final report, a document that compiled all the information that the Commission had received, organized that information in order to understand what had happened, and to make recommendations to the country. Now, we have seen 4 cases, very different ones, very different kinds of atrocity of human rights violations: internal conflict, racism, cultural genocide, a massacre. And in all those cases, the story that needs to be told is very complicated because it has structural roots, structural frameworks to understand what was going on. It has also the specific story, what happened in this particular case, the anecdote. So how to ensure that the nation, that the public, that the citizens are going to understand such a complex story. Moreover, a story that has been denied officially because the state, the government never wanted to accept that this has happened, right? Not in a country like Peru or Canada or South Africa, not in a city like Greensboro. So, but they ended up, because of the situation, in the situation of creating a truth commission. And they had to accept the fact that they had to listen to these stories and accept that they were true. So the hearings helped the commissions to do this, to provide a space in which you restore credibility to the voice of the victims. And that was profoundly important, profoundly significant, because at least in my case, in the case of Peru, you know, the public space has always been reserved to some people. The powerful, corporations, politicians, people who have some kind of celebrity. No, I had never heard, in growing in Peru, in my life, in national TV, people speaking in Quechua language. Never. Right? It had never happened before. It was only with the Truth Commission that it happened. Quechua language, Aymara language, Ashaninka language, and many others. It was the first time it happened. There was never, in the case of Peru, an opportunity in which persons of an organization created by the government, by the state, were sitting on the same table with victims and survivors of an atrocity caused by the state. It had never happened before, right? And I think what we wanted to show with the hearings was that this kind of dialogue and recognition and acknowledgement could happen. So that's perhaps my reflection about what we tried to convey in the Peruvian hearings. But the cases are, as you see, very different. And this is just a selection. There have been around 40 Truth Commissions in the world. And I would say broadly 15 have had public hearings, perhaps more. And all of those look different. They have particularities. They are culturally appropriate for each particular country, location. So this is the challenge for you. First of all, to decide, under the truth-telling item rubric of your mandate, what do you want to do with that? Is it public hearings? Is it town halls? Is it some other type of platform? Circles, theater plays, music? What kind of testimony, what kind of platform would you want to establish? Are those platforms going to look similar to what you have seen, or are they going to be more specific, more reflective of the culture, the logic, the wisdom of Iowa and Iowa City, right? So those are the questions that are open, and perhaps this would be a good moment for having a few reactions about what we have seen and ideas about how what we have seen may be useful for us in the TRC.
First, I would like to thank you for presenting that to us right there. That was extremely helpful and moving. I think, my own personal opinion, we should definitely have it out in public. I think we should make sure that we also add a theater aspect to it. I am a firm believer of people have to feel it themselves in order to understand what it's like. And I think a mixture of the two can be very helpful. That I've been thinking about that for a long time, and I was hoping that we would get around here with that. So I was wondering your thoughts too.
One thing I was thinking about too, because we think about doing it in public, so we get the word out. But when it talked about the system about asking the people, how do they want to tell their truths? Because technically it's their story, and they need to be the ones that feel comfortable and safe to tell it, and in what environment and what method. So it's like we need to think of multiple avenues that people can tell their truth. Not the way we necessarily see it, but how they want to do it. And the question is, how do we get out and ask them?
I'll piggyback on that. Thank you again, Eduardo. For me, I've been lucky to hear you talk about the various truth commissions that have happened around the world. The other two times, I've also heard you talk about the Kenyan one. And of course, it's interesting that I really got to know about the Kenyan one. I'm from the country, and I was actually part of the victims yet I didn't even get to really learn about it and go back and engage until you talked about it, both as you've done your presentations with us commissioners, as we learn about TRCs, and also during the courses that we took over 6 weeks with, you were part of that. So you gave us a lot of information on what was happening. Now watching it again, I'm piggybacking to what Cliff and Lauren are talking about, to what you said and what Sakawis talked about. As we go out into our communities to hear and to listen, to contextualize, you're talking about in Peru, listening to people in their languages. And that's one of the things that we have here. And as we've been doing this work, I keep also wanting to make sure that we also bring in the Hispanic community, because I've been feeling their absence, and they're there. The absence is very loud. And also to think about not just the linguistic context, but also the cultural context as we move in. So not necessarily inviting the communities and as we do our listenings, but ourselves going to the communities. If the Mohammed doesn't go to the mountain, then let the mountain go to Mohammed. I'll stop there.
Thank you. So there are a few sorry.
Is it okay? The thing that keeps coming to me, I mentioned that this task seems so big and everything, is I feel like the biggest thing that makes us unique is that we don't have one culture or one group of people to think about. Even in the Black community, that's several different groups, and we're trying to come up with something to fit everyone. It seems we need multiple TRCs for every group. So I'm thinking about, how do we decide which way to go? How do we decide who to work with first? Or do we decide to do it all, which seems impossible? So that's what I'm thinking about. How do we prepare for any of this if the one thing that was putting them all together is they had that one event or that one thing that brought them together? I know ours was initiated with the murder of George Floyd, but that is not a local event. So it just feels a little bit different.
So thank you for the interventions. A few ideas that come to mind. So first, the public character of the activity, right? The ordinance creating the commission says that there has to be truth-telling, but it doesn't tell you in what form exactly. It gives a few ideas. It says you explore forms of organizing this, and it mentions public hearings as a possibility. So it's not that you are forced to create a public hearing, but you can explore forms in which you create a platform for people to tell their stories. The challenge now is to, put our minds to work and think, how is that going to look like? Now, another question here. Does every survivor want to actually come and speak in public? Clearly not. Many people are not prepared, do not have the obligation, of course, and they may never want to do that, but they want to talk. So the commission needs to also establish spaces for private conversations, to receive testimony that is directly given to the commission in the conditions in which the survivor wants to share them. Survivors may want to tell their story just for the moment, not being recorded, just to be listened. Survivors may want the story to be recorded. Survivors may not want to give a name. Survivors may want to give a name. So all those possibilities should not be a decision of the commission, but a decision of the survivor. And on the question of what is public, what is not, again, the criteria is what the survivors are telling you. In the case of Colombia, which had just had a truth commission, I didn't bring the video because it was in Spanish, but in the case of Colombia, they organized a specific hearing to talk about sexual violence, which, of course, it's incredibly difficult to think of as an activity that you're going to make in public, right? Different commissions have addressed the question of the voices of survivors of sexual violence in different way. In Colombia, what they did was, there were survivors who wanted to speak in public, who wanted to give their face, their name, and speak about what they had suffered. There were others who wrote what had happened, and an actress, a person from the public would read what this person had mentioned. There were others who wanted to actually speak, but to have the space completely darkened when they were in the stage speaking about what had happened. So there were many possibilities here, and the Commission accommodated the survivors to tell their stories in the way they wanted to do that. So the idea here is, this is not an act of voyeurism for the public. This is an act of dignification, an act of recognition for the survivor. In order to do that, it has to be done in the conditions that the survivors want, not the conditions that the Commission wants. So that has to do with the question of publicity, isn't it?
If I could add, Eduardo, I'm glad you said that. Speaking is also not just a verbal, audio activity. As we are telling stories, I think about the way history and stories are transposed for African American women through braiding. I've been watching Commissioner, and it may be just a way of being present in the room, crocheting, right? Like the knitting. There's a difference. There's a difference. There's so many ways people can tell their stories that don't have to be a testimony in the way that we traditionally recognize testimony, that is culturally appropriate, allows for the, a month ago, my neck was sliced open and I could not speak. And to be able to even speak right now, or to be at a moment where I wanted to and I just physically couldn't. But that didn't mean, like, I had to communicate to my doctor that I was about to die. So there are many ways that we, and it may not be anything that has ever been seen before in anybody else's commission, that if you allow yourselves to be open to how your community is communicating to you about what they want to share.
I'll piggyback on Stephanie's words. You've just reminded me, people of African origin speak through song and dance. And every year we get the Soweto Township Choir coming to Hancha at the University of Iowa Theater. And the apartheid was dismantled, but we know it's still, the legacy is still there. So for the 3 hours they come and perform, everybody who comes out of that theater, you are left with that. A lot of the people, I being one of them, we don't understand the South African languages they sing in. One of them is Xhosa. But you are left with that story and those experiences. And some of them didn't even directly experience apartheid. But they talk through song and dance, and it does come through. Even if you go right now, watch their recordings, that has reminded me. And even a lot of our songs, the African songs, those of us who've become Americans, even as we experience what has been in the past and what still happens, we do it in song and dance and express that. Yeah.
I just wanted to go through the question Chastity raised, the question of the diversity of voices, diversity of cultures, and diversity of modes of sharing, right? As you can imagine, I mean, in Peru, we were talking about a country of 30 million, right? And we have 42 native languages in our country, in addition to Spanish, right? And just organizing that was incredibly complicated, right? We didn't have commissioners who spoke all the languages of the people who were harmed. The national TV had never done live translation, for example, of this kind of thing. And so we needed to find the mechanism. Now, the commission was very short. We operated only for 2 years. After the commission finished, the storytelling continued. Only it continued in different ways. Right? Communities themselves started to do activities to tell stories. One that I want to show you is what they did with the help of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and it's called the Scarf of Hope. And basically what it means is that the relatives of the people who were disappeared or missing came to there to do this, and you're going to see it.
La charina se empezó a hacer hace 5 años en Perú, básicamente y centralizada en Ayacucho, con familiares inmediatos víctimas de desaparición forzada y desaparición durante el conflicto. Eventualmente creció, se fue a Lima, se fue a Ucayali, se fue a otros departamentos del Perú. También tuvimos participación de gente de fuera, vino gente de Argentina, de Colombia, de Chile, que enviaron pedacitos de chalina. Más o menos calculamos que unos cientos de personas han estado involucradas en hacer la chalina. La idea era que cada uno tejiera un pedacito con el color que prefiriera, con el tejido, el punto, y después unir todos los pedazos y hacer
So basically,
la idea es que cada uno teja
family,
un
each
pedacito
relative
de
of a
memoria,
person who was
esperando que aparezca el
disappeared
familiar
or got missing, created its own scarf with the names or mementos or ideas.
A las 12:30 de la noche entraron a mi casa los militares encapuchados y lo sacaron violentamente a mi esposo. Ya son 31 años que busco, pero no se sabe la verdad.
Can we stop it there?
En Perú, las mujeres en el campo, por ejemplo, las señoritas, jóvenes, ¿no? Regalamos una chalina a nuestros, quizás a nuestros enamorados, ¿no? Estas chalinas, en esto dice sus nombres con mucho cariño, todas las familiares, que esas esposas o madres de los desaparecidos, asesinados, han hecho esta chalina.
Poder contar más allá de las fronteras lo que ha pasado.
So what she says is something very, very interesting. She says that in the Highlands, it is traditional that as a gesture of love for someone, a gesture of favoring someone, you are going to prepare a scarf. And you're going to give this person a scarf. It can be your boyfriend, it can be someone in your family that you love particularly. So what they said is, we re-signify that particular gesture. And we put the names there of the people who got disappeared and whose bodies have not been returned to us. And so they invited relatives all over the country until they got a few hundreds, and then they made a scarf. They joined all the pieces, and they made a scarf which is about 1,000 meters long. The scarf is now in the National Museum of Memory in Peru, so everybody can see it, and it's another way of bearing witness to something, right, to what happened. Many of these people were not able to come to the Truth Commission or to participate in a public hearing. Or perhaps they may not even want to participate in a public hearing, but they wanted to speak anyway, and they wanted to be represented anyway. If we had had the time, probably we would have explored this kind of possibility, right? But we only worked 23 months, as I told you. We never had all the resources or the ideas. We were very much under the impact of South Africa, which had happened just before. And we were kind of emulating that, trying to do something that was pretty much inspired by South Africa. But there were other mechanisms. And in fact, after our experience, so many of these initiatives have multiplied. So here is an invitation to creativity, really. And that is where I think I could leave it. And we can continue with the conversation.
When did the Peru one happen? What year was Peru's?
The Peruvian Commission? The Commission worked from 2001 to 2003.
Okay.
How are we in terms of the program?
Oh, we're great. Dave and Melinda are going to jump in because they have even more ideas to present and compare with possibilities again. And you all aren't limited to say, like, we're only going to do this, you know.
You're gonna take like,
10 minutes?
probably take 5 minutes, come right back, and while we.
Welcome back. I love that word, like welcome. It's also like welcome back, you know.
Thank you. Testing. All right. Yeah. Yes. You know, so I'm gonna just start a little bit like a pre-start, and I'm gonna sing. Yeah. And one of my favorite songs to sing before entering into something is Around My Ancestors, and this is from the Black Youth Project. After Laquan McDonald was murdered by the Chicago police, many of the Black Youth Project had a chant, and it was like, I know they're watching, ancestors watching, I know they're watching, I know. And to me, like when I do this work of truth telling, it's about invoking something sacred, and that is my ancestors and those who become martyrs unwillingly. And particularly that's what police violence has been in this country. People who unwillingly became martyrs. And I would just give you a little bit which kind of piggybacks onto Eduardo's conversation as well. And it's about essentially how we came into this work, and also like what are some examples, what does this look like in practice? And I'll be honest, I think that what we were doing in Ferguson and St. Louis was very similar, right? Because you all began thinking about a TRC after the George Floyd protest. While in Ferguson, we started thinking about truth and reconciliation as an intervention. And, you know, some of the context, a big context that's similar is social movement. It was happening. And I don't want you to forget that. That social movement was about this work that you all are engaged in. And it's not just Iowa City, but a larger social movement. And sometimes police violence can come to be a big outward face of so many other structural issues because communities around the country experience police violence. The violence of police are like the tip of the spear, the visible part that many communities see under colonial empire rule. And so for us, I don't even know if people remember what that protest was like, or if we remember, like we forget, like just the craziness happening during times of protest. And for our context, it was St. Louis. It was a year before the Ferguson uprising. There was a British reporter who came to St. Louis to study cities that experienced tremendous segregation. And at the time, I was a faculty member at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. And this person came in and looked at the street called the Delmar Divide. And north side of Delmar, black people live, people of color, and it was extremely impoverished. And south of Delmar, mostly white community, much more resources supported by the city. And this is like a clothing bin, this other picture right here that you see my cursor around. That was like right during the protest. People were just showing their feelings about what was happening throughout. And I have a little video, let's see if I can. So I like to have videos from...
He's supposed to have been locked up. If it was a black man, we would be locked up. That man supposed to be locked up. Superman said and the investigation will be done. But that man's supposed to be locked up. You want justice? You want peace? You lock that man up, and then you charge him, and everything will be all right. Maybe the black people go home, but till they charge him, ain't gonna be no justice, man.
What's the plan for the night? 22, 23 minutes away from the curfew.
I mean, we'll see it well. Nobody know, I don't know, but I'm going with the people. Hands up, don't shoot. That hands up. I'm going to the right.
Y'all straight from Ferguson, 23 minutes before the curfew. People are still out here resisting. The world is watching, and y'all need to see this, y'all. Justice for Mike Brown.
Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot.
All right. So I just wanted to show that to just give you all some context of like what it was feeling like every day. I came to St. Louis, honestly, for my mama's birthday. I was a year later after Delmar Divide. I was teaching at a college in Pennsylvania. Mom's birthday and my nephew's birthday on the day Mike Brown was murdered. And I come home to that. I come home to, I'd never seen any protests like that before. People was mad. People was unwilling to go home. People, they were challenging everything. And it wasn't until this young brother named Kajim Powell was killed across the street from my parents' house. It's a couple days later. I don't know if you all can see the memorial. And maybe it'll, and I'll just, and then later on that night, it was okay, that's not gonna work, but, it was that kind of feeling, like this young man, Kajimi Powell, had went into a grocery store, got this can of energy drink, put it on the sidewalk, count 10 seconds, he was dead. As the police arrived. And everybody in the neighborhood knew that this young man had some concerns. And my neighborhood had been a very strong black working class neighborhood that while I was in high school, we got crack. To this day, my brother is still addicted to crack. And in the video, I'm gonna give you all, this is your PowerPoint, so you can go back and look and see what I'm talking about. And this man is talking about transformative justice, talking about the ways that black communities ran themselves without police interference, and what that looks like when police interfere. And so then Ferguson became this kind of symbol for resistance nationwide in ways that that I didn't know that I was taking on, And I'll just give you like a little sample. This is some music from.
They don't know their own name.
they have lost their identity, their own identity. So this is amnesia. And by not knowing themselves, when a man doesn't know himself, he doesn't know what belongs to him. He could be the richest man on this earth, but by having lost his identity, he'll walk around like a pauper. So here we have 20 million black people in America who are wearing the names of their former slave master, as we've been taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And by suffering a form of amnesia, they don't have a name of their own, so they've taken your name. They don't know their own language, so they've taken your language. They don't have a history of their own, so they let you tell them what their history is. And that, in essence, is that you found them in the jungle someplace with a spear, chasing white people in a cannibalistic way.
King of the underground city, in my city, niggas wanna throw slugs at a nigga. Chasing his feelings right now, and I hope it don't last, cause I love that nigga. I saw Nelly in the club, stretch bought a few bottles, we don't really give a fuck right now. Cause we the new niggas with our own situation, we raising the bar right now. I know names to my name on Twitter, but no, I can't blame that nigga. Cause I'm the hottest rapper in the city right now, you can tell me where your brain at, nigga. I don't give a fuck about nothing, I don't even care about dying. So maybe you should think about that when you put a nigga name in your rhymes. They say I never did this, they say I never did that, but you ain't never did this, so I don't give a fuck about that. I'm the talk of the town around here. Tell me, can you take that shit? Knife wounds in my arms, I was bleeding like a motherfucker. Wish I could take that shit. I say I sold my soul, niggas acting like they couldn't even try to see the message in the verse. But I'm a god, motherfucker. I reply, motherfucker, you already know you done did worse. Mama in the hospital, I ain't even called, so I know that she feels some type of way. But I tell her this is bigger than music, and you the reason that I put my life on the line every day. Yeah. I ride through the city like a Malcolm X. Haters wanna drill me, I don't feel regrets. I ride through my city like a Malcolm X. I could feel the jealousy, I see the threats.
That was incredible.
Ashe. So, you know, this is the context for us starting the Truth Telling Project. That feeling that, like, how do we have another space for people to tell stories? We didn't want to mediate anything. We wanted to, you know, tell stories, but also inspired by a radical edge of activism. And also the context was Black Lives Matter, which is also an ideological intervention, which is listed here as well. And I just want to name, like, for us, Black Lives Matters, like, meant this self-adjudicating moral claim about the worthiness of Black lives. Also, the context is justice in the U.S., rooted in a social contract tradition. The original position as mutual benefit among equal parties. And if you are Black, Indigenous, Native American, you are not an original party. So if you look at this room right here of all these white dudes, the people in charge of our country look similar still. Or it might be some Black and brown folks, people in, you know, in a room as well. So one of the things because of this original position and because of how we understood truth, we understand that truth as perpetuated by society, even police, was essentially a creation of ignorance or willful ignorance, or even a reinforcement of silence. And if people have specific questions about the concepts, I can talk about it later. As well as the way that when people try to tell their truth and when people have movements and change, something like called counter-mobilization occurs. And that is when groups take on some of the same language of, say, civil rights and social movements, or even Black Lives Matter, and say white lives matter, as a way to counter-mobilize against the thing that you're trying to create. So we came to truth-telling with this understanding of what truth-telling was, that is a beginning of a moral inventory. Truth-telling is a moral inventory. It asks us who we are. And I like this quote from Alice Walker where she says that each 1,000 years of our silence is examined with regret. The cruel manner in which our values of compassion and kindness have been ridiculed and suppressed must be brought to bear on the disaster of the present time. The past must be examined closely, I believe, before we can leave it there. And so we created this project that was for us an altar space of justice. Since we weren't getting justice, since police had been infiltrating our protests and our groups and our communications, we created this project where it didn't matter if that happened, but people could tell their own truths, tell their own stories, rooted in this context of transitional justice or truth and reconciliation. And we can build our own narrative, create our own rituals, so that we could decide what justice looks like. And even while we were doing this, there were other people, like, for instance, Department of Justice reached out to us and asked what they could do. We said nothing. The city also asked us, like, how do you cooperate in that particular moment? So I'm just naming, it's a particular moment of protest, a particular moment of active organizing against, the state, like figuring out ways to, we were thinking, like, is this the beginning of a revolution? This is a different time. And so we created essentially this project, and I'll share with you our mandate and declaration. I'm just including it in this document so you can have a link to it. But basically we created the mandate to say, like, what justifies this work? Why are we doing it? Who gives us, or what situation gives us the authority to do it? And in a similar, like, ultimately, you make your own authority. When group of people come together, they can lay claim to whatever morality, whatever situation occurred, to say this is a valid process. And while we were doing this, there were other groups laying claim to what we were doing, and also the city creating what they called the Ferguson Commission, which was about business. How does business look after this? And we got a lot of our learning from Greensboro. So I'm going to jump. We also had Bishop Tutu. This was what Bishop Tutu, the message he sent us. Thanks to folks like Eduardo and Chris Toffolo. And he said, friends, I've learned that already due to your compassion, your courageous presence, and unbowed spirits in the streets and halls of power over the last 8 months, that you have begun to be heard, and that you have changed the nature of the national conversation about racist police violence, bringing to light the unfortunate pattern that, until you stood up, had largely been understood as isolated events. But now the nation is debating the deep problem of structural racism and militarized police tactics. This reframing of the problem is the first step toward true and lasting transformation. So I just kind of listed on this page some of the framing for the work. You know, part of it obviously is with Truth Commission, and in addition to being focused on truth telling, we weren't sure. Like, and this was all our community, like the community, like groups of people we had convened on multiple occasions, town halls, activist meetings. We were telling them what we wanted to do, and we were asking for consent. And they said, well, we like truth telling, but we don't know about reconciliation. Like, reconcile with who? And so that's just some of the framing of what we were thinking. Given the ongoing violence, given that we weren't post-conflict. And it feels like a different time now. So part of what we decided on was we would create a official report, we would do truth seeking, we would move alongside social movements, we would accompany them and deal with the issues of direct structural violence, human dignity. Also framing our work in critical race theory, dun dun dun. Derek Bell is the founder of that, and just looking at his framework in this particular book, And We Are Not Saved, essentially critiques the notion of that civil right. Well, this book basically says that there's a remaining structure of racism that's foundational to this nation. That's the basic argument of the book. And so we were looking at that, as well as intersectionality, all of these areas. Because especially if when we think about truth and reconciliation and transitional justice, the reason why it's termed transitional justice is because it's usually after post-conflict or some really difficult situation that we're transitioning away from and thinking about justice after this particular situation. Also, this framework of colonization and neo-colonization. Like, you may be a person of color, but who's in your head? What cop is in your head? Are you operating out of a colonialized mentality? And so essentially our work began specifically in the protest space, where we began with these videos are going around getting people to tell their stories, their truth about what they wanted to see happen. What does justice look like? So people would tell their stories online, usually, or on YouTube and through our website, about what do we want to happen. And this is before Darren Wilson was not indicted. So people were sending us videos and posting. If you Google it even, people were like, well, I want this to happen and this to happen. This is what I think justice is. Then the pictures that you see are from the Truth Telling Weekend. But we initiated because our organization, or the group that we were a part of, my own connections, and Melinda as well, comes out of peace and conflict studies. So I did my PhD focusing on peace and conflict studies, and we noticed that most faculty, most universities had a peace studies or conflict resolution or related department, and we sent word out to universities around the country that given that Darren Wilson did get indicted, we wanted people to do a vigil of 4.5 minutes of silence around the same time that Mike Brown was murdered, representing the time that boy laid in the street in the hot sun for 4.5 hours, and people, police made jokes over his body, and all kind of things like that. And then we had a Truth Telling Weekend to bring all the interested folks together so they could learn about truth and reconciliation, and we could talk about what this might look like. So these are just some images from that. And then that led to what we call the launch of our process, which we call the Truth Initiative. And we use different language from traditional transitional justice. For instance, we call the people who gave testimony truth tellers. And so, for instance, Cori Bush, she came and she told one of her stories, also as one of the co-directors. And this is Mama Cat, and this was part of our Witnesses to the Truth. And we had local folk and national folk hearing us. And I'll give you an example of what some of the testimony looked like.
We are inviting you to share your story with 30 minutes time frame allowed for each truth teller. Ms. Taylor, please tell us your story of direct or indirect experience with police violence, please.
Okay. My son, Kerry Ball Jr., was my firstborn, and he was shot a total of 21 times by 2 St. Louis City police officers, Jason Chambers and Timothy Boyce. And less than 30 days later, we was making this video with St. Louis American, and you can watch it right here for yourselves.
Completing over 12 development education credits. And this was given to him, he was a
Police harassment right there, and involvement with the police. At first, when we only had a medical report paper from Kerry, we hadn't had the autopsy yet. So the medical report did say that it was a total of 25 wounds in Kerry's body. Some of those was accident injuries, but it was a total of 21 gunshots to Kerry body. Like they said on that night, Kerry was coming home from work. He was actually finna drop a coworker off down at O'Fallon Place, and they stopped at the 7-Eleven down on 18th and Pine in the downtown area. Right there, one set of police officers decided to follow Kerry for tinted windows. Well, in St. Louis, that's a no chase policy. You're not supposed to stop anybody for tinted windows. And Kerry car was registered, and the tint was of legal tint limit.
I'm just gonna pause it, but I've given you the links, and this whole document is available to you. There's also Michael Brown Sr.'s testimony in here. And then this document right here is, in addition to the testimony, some people didn't want to testify in public. And we had an arrangement where they testified in a private place, and they were able to decide how much access they wanted to give to the public about that testimony. And this document is right there. And so all of the testimony led to what was called a night of 1,000 conversations. So this is really an important part, because in order for the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation to get the public to buy into it, there was a play about the Greensboro Truth Commission. And after the play, it was one of the nights that people in town go out, they go to the restaurants, and they put note cards at all the tables. And they called it a night of 1,000 conversations. So people were talking in their communities about what happened in Greensboro. So we did something similar. After the testimony, we simultaneously streamed it out to about 40 different communities around the country, and we provided questionnaires and worksheets for people to talk about police violence, along with the testimony as an entry point. And I'm just gonna wrap this up real quick, but also just name that some of our other activities included, like, what we did was we didn't have the funds to do fact-finding in that way, so we stayed with mostly public and well-documented stories. And we also created a learning platform so that more people could benefit it. And it's called It's Time to Listen. And I hope and this is the website, and it basically gives folks a way into the testimonies. Some of the issues that come up with people's testimony, like militarization of police, structural poverty, school to prison pipeline. We've also done teachers convenings. We were part of helping to push forward a national truth process around police violence. And one of the big things we also did was Youth Speak Truth, and this speaks to where Eduardo was leaving off, where youth mostly testified, and we created a space for them. Before the whole thing, we did a workshop, and we had therapists like the whole time. And the workshop was about teaching youth how to tell stories. We did it with StoryCorps. We had a session where we taught youth how to make film. This is one of the films that they made. It's called Youth Speak Truth. I'll just give you a quick second of it.
On August 9th, 2014, Mom was in her room watching TV, and she was like, the policeman just killed Mike Brown.
Ferguson, like, that's like right next door to us. Like, what happened? Like, what's going on?
They called my mama phone, and she answered the phone. She was like, okay, I give him the phone. He jumped up off the couch and was like, the police killed my son. And the next thing I know is just I was running downstairs crying.
Trina almost fell down the steps. I couldn't cry because I was in such a shocked moment. So I was like, no, they got the wrong person. So I went out there and all I could see was smoke. And then I seen a whole line of men. It was like they had on all costumes with a shield in front of them with their guns in their hand pointed at us. That's when.
And then these are also other testimony from youth. One of the testimony was a young man doing a praise dance because he didn't want to talk. And before, some of the things you see on these images is we did these little cards, and one of this activist group called the Artivists put them all around the city, and they had like pop-up art space where youth filled it out and gave messages about what they wanted to see happen. This one brother right here, Damon Davis, created a mural for the whole truth-telling, like this particular session of hearings. Go ahead.
So just jump really quick and come into here. I was teaching in northwest New Mexico, Gallup, New Mexico, and came back after once the Truth Telling Project had begun, and we met with Navajo organizers and activists who I knew when I was teaching in New Mexico. And one of the things that I want to tie into the earlier conversation here is the cultural relevancy of how we do truth telling. The stories that were told were recorded by another Navajo filmmaker in very small private spaces. Some of the women wanted to tell their stories about missing persons, sexual violence, racism in Gallup, New Mexico. and they wanted to tell their stories in their Hogan or to find their own sacred space where they go to for their peace, well-being, and to tell their stories there. And also, the other piece that was really important to mention here is that before we had permission to use the stories, they had to be approved is not the right word, but acknowledged by the elders of the community. So very different setting than being in a public space, in a church setting, at a podium up front. So the cultural relevance of with whom the stories are being told is very important, and I think that speaks to some of the Chastity, you had mentioned that earlier. I'm going to just zoom ahead to really quickly to just give two super fast case studies in the state of Maine where the Department of Health and Human Services identified issues with ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and organized and invited this is the state of Maine and the indigenous communities in the state of Maine, invited them to come together to better understand what their concerns were and help here. Where are we?
Just do like this. Use this.
Yeah, and discovered the amount of tension and mistrust that took place between the state and the tribal communities. And from that, they created the State of Maine Wabanaki Child Welfare Trust and Reconciliation Commission, and brought tribal people throughout the state of Maine together to tell their stories, which is well documented in film and documentaries, and we're going to provide those resources for you. The reason why I am sharing this with you is to show the institutional mechanisms that took place from first identifying an issue and then reaching out to the communities and addressing the mistrust that exists. And from the Truth Commission came a permanent commission on the status of racial, indigenous, and tribal peoples throughout the state of Maine. Another example that I want to share with you real quick is in New Mexico, two women from the Zuni and Navajo tribes were invited to tell their stories about the ways in which the state, the public education system was not meeting the needs of the indigenous students. New Mexico is one of 3 states where there is an Indian education law, and the judge found that the state of New Mexico, or they brought a case. They sued the state of New Mexico and found, in fact, that the state had been in violation of and not in compliance with Indian education law. And as a result of that, people came together in truth-telling, peacemaking circles, and we don't need to go into the detail of that, but through meeting with superintendents and academics and hundreds of people from throughout the state, were able to propose how to bring the state in compliance with the Education Act. And here, I don't think we're going to have time for this one, but what I want to say here is that there needs to be, once it gets to that larger institutional level, ongoing connection with the ways in which the acts are being implemented, and it takes, the scale is much larger when you're working with the state, and the feedback takes longer, and so it's not an overnight success, but at least the processes get put into place. And I know that I'm just rushing through that, so we'll have enough time for there to be dialogue.
I will add one more thing, just that some of the activities that, is possible is, like, we created a podcast. We did all kinds of things for community so that community could have a chance to engage. In addition to having silent protest, like all of it, like whatever communities want to do, we tried to do something, That's why outreach is so crucial, and you're only going to get buy-in if you're doing what folks in your community want you to do. And also, one of our overarching guides is we always say, this is what we did. You don't have to do it. We just sharing what we did and how we did it and why we did it.
And there's one final thing I'd like to say here is this was not a Truth and Reconciliation formal commission, but I was in Bolivia in 2000 when working with amongst the Quechua, and they were addressing gender inequities in their communities, and the way that they would do that was using their own traditional media, guitar, song, dance, to replicate the dramas that take place in their communities. And what was interesting is the young girls who were invited by their parents to take care of the babies while the adults were working through all this gender stuff. The lasting effect was, rather than the parents being able to maintain a shift in their cultural attitudes towards gender, it was the young girls, the 12-year-olds, who were babysitting the little kids that eventually made decisions in their life to not get pregnant at 14, to leave the rural areas to get education, and then ultimately to return to their villages to continue to give back to their community. So there's so many different ways that are go ahead.
And even similar to that, like something that fed into like the way we thought about it in Brazil, if you look at police violence in the U.S., it's similar, except for at a much elevated pace in Rio, in Brazil in general. And as a graduate student, I worked with a researcher, and we studied what communities did in order to respond. And one of the things they did was they put up posters and pictures, images of people who had been lost by police violence. They called it a mural of pain. And it went from favela to favela throughout Rio, and was also part of a museum project as well. So people are using these ways to tell truth, to heal, and also put it in people's face of what's happening, so that truth is not deniable, and that people have a place to go.
So I think one of the biggest things that we hope you all will take away for the evening is, and even these 3 days together, is that it's your world, right? Like, it's so open to how you address the 3 aspects of this resolution for yourselves and for your communities. And the amount of creativity comes from the diversity of bodies and beings who are in the room, and even from the examples that are given. Yes, you all have a resolution that City Council passed, but you're not beholden to only the resolution. In Ferguson, the community was like, we're going to do this state not sponsored. And even as the state wants to quote unquote support, and when I say state, the governmental mechanisms, we reject your support because that is not the truth that we want to engage with. So there are a multitude of ways that you all can think about the work that's ahead of you and what is going to best benefit you all as community.
And if folks have questions, we love to share. And just naming, like, as we switched over and Melinda talked about indigenous truth-telling, that was one of the major conversations we had. How do we share what we did without imposing? And I mean, obviously the community was like, "You not imposing, this is what we gonna do. We like your ideas, tell us what you did, this is what we gonna do." So appreciated that.
And then coming back to bringing, working within BIPOC communities, the indigenous peacemaking circles that I'm engaged in New Mexico really are working on the reservation or working with agencies in the state and have not worked cross-culturally with others. So that's a huge area and a request for cultural competency tools and skills, because even amongst the peacemakers, there's lack of experience in working with diverse groups. And you may find that here, and we're really eager to learn how you're going to navigate those waters.
So you may not have answers tonight because a lot was shared once again, but we would like to close out this evening with you all. Just again, if anybody wants to share their reflection on any part that was offered tonight and just how you are leaving the space on this evening.
Once again, I loved everything that you guys had, and I feel like each one of those can be used. If we can kind of split things up and start working in those directions, I feel like that's the best way to route.
Thank you.
Theater, I'm a theater guy myself. I've been a part of that, and I know how much it can bring everybody together. It's the one thing that we all do that's a universal thing, no matter where you're from or who you are, between song, dance, everything along those lines. I believe that is the right way, and I love the ideas you had about even dropping off the cards at the restaurants for afterwards and everything. That is exactly how you get the conversation rolling and get people to really understand. After good shows, we would all, depending on what you're doing, it can really resonate and it really can push forward. I appreciate your thoughts. Looking forward to rocking it. Let's go.
Thank you, facilitators, or call you facilitator, since yesterday, beginning your work and continuing to give us clarity on how we are supposed to be the point people for our community as we navigate the mandates. Today, for me, Larry, you began with the why and the what. Eduardo, you came in and you took us through the mandate again, and it was interesting for me. It was even sounding as if I've never seen that resolution. Thank you for taking us back there. and also even how it came about and how we were all part of that, and how we've been to get to this point. And as I leave tonight, I'm excited we're here because each of you have given us all those examples of all those other commissions that have been where we are going. And then also also you being part, Eduardo, you being part of Peru, David, you guys being part of Vagason. So seeing where you have walked and appreciating your sharing that, not once, keeping on sharing such that it continues being clearer what is ahead of me, ahead of us, and all the various ways that it has been done. And at one point somebody said, there's even the things that are going to take place and ways that are going to happen that even all of us in this room are not aware of. Mm-hmm. Because this is Iowa City, it is local, but at the same time, it's not just national, it's also global. Mm-hmm. Because we're dealing with something that is beyond our city. Stephanie, you ended up with reminding us it's ours, the commissioners who are leading our communities, and what has been offered here. It's a glimpse of what has happened elsewhere, but it's a thing with its own. It's a what with its own life that we are part of, and what is going to determine sometimes how we go about it and what we do, and not forgetting that our communities are leading us, like in some of those examples you've given us. And Stephanie, when you've just spoken last, you mentioned what I'll call cultural sensitivity. And as I think of that, I'm thinking earlier on I used the word irrelation, and the first time I heard that word in connection with Iowa City, there was an African American student who had been excited to be admitted to graduate school at the University of Iowa. I forget her name, but I do know she wrote in the Daily Iowan, she wrote an essay in the cultural section. And it was some time back when I was also going to grad school. And it has stayed with me, and especially that word, irrelation, because it captured I've been in the state of Iowa and in Iowa City exactly 20 years. And that's how she said she came to this University of Iowa, and of course, it's our university, it's in Iowa City. So, and she was very excited, but she had to transfer out because she felt in irrelation as an African American young woman. She felt she's there, but she's not seen. She's not even, it's so white, and she was in irrelation with that. And I said, okay, that's really the word that I've had with the city that I was coming for just 2 years to to do my master's and go back with my 3 daughters and my two sons and my now ex-husband. But it didn't happen that way. We're here. And that word, even as Stephanie, you talked about cultural sensitivity. This word came back again. We are different cultural groups. And for me, we are in a relation. And for me, that is sitting there and working with that feeling of a relation. So I'm leaving this room today excited that we are working. We began to work, but yes, we are working, but it's heavy. And especially when we get out of there. For the last almost now going to 3 years, for us here, we are different in our own ways, but we've worked into ourselves into a working group. Easy, we've shared and expressed that it's not been, and it's not getting any easier. And now when we finally already, it's continuing to have a life of its own, if we even look at the numbers, and there are going to be more. But for me, the relation still stands there. And therefore, what you've just said, cultural sensitivity, being aware, so what do we do about that? And how do we use that or not use that to work with our different cultural groups and whatever other beautiful differences that are there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I really appreciate all the knowledge and experiences that you guys have brought to the table. You've shown such a wide range of different ways to make this happen and given so many different examples. And so it's given me a lot to think about, and it makes me pretty excited, like, oh my gosh, we could do this in so many ways. So I really appreciate the knowledge and experiences that you guys are bringing. Thank you.
If no one else has anything, I'm going to move to opening to public comments. Okay, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for all the presentations. If there's anyone online that would like to speak, give a public comment on what we just spoke about for the last couple hours, please raise your hand. If there's anyone in the room that would like to address us, now is the time. You can come to this microphone over here and give us public comment.
I commend you all individually and all together. I've been living in this town for a long time. I've never seen this much coloring together in one place.
Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other public comment, I'm going to move to adjourn. Oh, did you? Oh, so if you would like to come up to the microphone.
Yeah, just have an issue about maybe on the presentations.
If you could go into the microphone so we can hear. Either one, whatever one you want.
I'm really bad at this. Yeah. I'm sorry. So I've seen your struggles here, and the presenters, our experts have told us different forms in which information has been gathered. And I know maybe this was not, but it's not a time for maybe to talk about this, but I would want us to include this in our storytelling later in the documentation. This is an aspect of the struggles you are going through, because it's a part of the process, because in itself, that one is a form of I would call it poor relations, discriminations in a way. So we might be talking about ourselves as individuals, but we have to also cover the institutional bigger picture of how the frustrations you are getting. Those are forms of discriminations, injustices that must be documented initially as a preamble. Yeah, so that's one aspect. The other aspect is on the different form of truth-telling. Yeah, you've covered very well the other forms. The other aspect that I would probably see, I don't know whether the capacity is there, is to mine the city. By that I mean, go into the documents of the city. These are the surveys they do take about police brutality, commissions, and other things, and see there were lots of recommendations done. Have they been implemented, or is this just a formality done every 2 years? We have all kinds of commissions, city commission, police, airports, and other things, human rights. And we want to look at those commissions. What is in there? Are these things just done as a formality and we bury them in the book somewhere? So if that capacity is there, maybe somebody somewhere might want to dig into that too, because this could be just a repetition of what has been happening in those other commissions. And that one is something I don't like, because at one time I attended the Human Rights Commission, and they were awarding grants to different groups. And one thing they didn't want was fact-finding. Yeah. They were telling us, you can apply for this grant for this and this, but us should have nothing to do with fact-finding, something to do with the research. And that really annoyed me. And I felt like, wow, you don't want us to tell the truth, but you want to give us a little money in here to start a project without knowing that. So that actually is one reason why I was very motivated to come to this, because that's something I follow very much, and I would want us to work on. Thank you very much.
You have laid the ground for tomorrow, and Larry is going to start with fact-finding.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? If not, I will move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.